So, this week is really hot.
This week has been really hot.
It's
That's true.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
I prefer to live in Alaska.
Okay.
I'm being serious. So I had something funny.
Have you ever been to Alaska?
I want to go. It's on my list.
Good. No, it's a place to go.
I heard like taking an Alaskan cruise is something that you should do.
Really?
People said, yeah, that it's actually really, really nice.
I don't know. I'm real hesitant with cruises.
You know, some of them like sink and catch on fire. Yeah.
No, it's not the sinking and catching on fire. It's just I don't know.
You know, a couple completely got rid of their home and sold it and are deciding to live out the rest of their years in retirement on a cruise ship.
Interesting.
Yeah, they said it was cheaper.
That I could believe.
Mm-hmm.
That I could believe. I don't know if I would do that. I know some people who bought a big RV, like a big old Winnebago, and that's how they're spending their retirement.
That's cool.
On the road in the Winnebago, and that's I appreciate that. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yesterday, you ever accidentally fall asleep too early in the evening and then you're like screwed up for life for the next day?
Well, so I've accidentally fallen asleep just sitting in a chair. I sit down
and then you knock out.
No, the big mistake I made was I sat in that chair. It wasn't that I wanted to go to sleep. It's that I sat in the chair and I should not have sat down.
So
and it's like I'll accidentally fall asleep and wake up, and sometimes it's been 10 minutes, sometimes it's been way longer than that, and I go, oh no. But oddly enough, usually for me, if I do fall asleep at some point during the day, it doesn't affect me too much at night. Yeah.
All right. Well, last night I fell asleep at 7:00. And I woke up at 1. I was like, You know what? Let me take a quick nap before I walk the dog for like, I was going to take him out for like a 45-minute walk. And I just missed all these phone calls, missed all these texts. I woke up at 1 and I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? I'm like wide awake. So I decided to work on my finances from 1 a.m. until about 3:50.
All right.
And then I went back to sleep. I caught up on some episodes as I was like doing my stuff, and I was like, well, I meant to do it early in the week and I didn't. So now I had a perfect time of silence.
Sure.
to get it done. So that's my morning, and now, and then I woke up like 2 hours later.
All right. Do you feel like you're back on schedule now, or are we still dealing with?
Surprisingly, I'm okay right now.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. Here we go.
It's an interesting move. The other day, our alarm company called me at 2 a.m. To tell me that I
wasn't here this time.
No, not to tell me that an alarm was going off. It was a robocall telling me that the system has not given a test signal in more than 24 hours. I was like, so at 2 a.m. you thought that was the right time to send this call? What? On what planet is that the best sort of customer service? I was really annoyed because at 2 a.m. I'm waking up seeing that there's a call coming in from the alarm company, which usually means that something is wrong. Something is going off and it shouldn't be going off, and I'm going to have to check on something. Nope.
Right. Wow.
Nope.
That's
just, hey, we noticed that there hasn't been a signal.
Were you able to go back to bed?
That couldn't have waited until
6?
I don't know, 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning.
An appropriate time,
It's not an emergency.
I was going to say, but it's an emergency for them.
But it's not. That's the thing. It's not an emergency. Come on. I was really annoyed.
I can only imagine.
So no, I couldn't go back to sleep. I ended up not falling asleep until 4, which wasn't real helpful because at that point I've only got about another
hour,
30 minutes to an hour before my alarm goes off anyway.
Dang. So you just stayed up?
No, I was trying to sleep.
Oh, that's like the worst space.
Yeah.
When you're fighting to go to sleep, but you're just wasting.
Well, it wasn't even that I was fighting. I was just sort of there, waiting.
Mm-hmm. It is really hot in here.
It is quite warm in here.
Open that door.
Well, that's not going to do anything. It's going to create too much noise, and it's not going to cool anything off.
All right, that's fine.
It's part of the problem.
All right.
We're just going to have to deal with it.
Sure. So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I was thinking actually it's interesting we talk about falling asleep and not falling asleep. I was just reading Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh.
So I don't know if you've ever read it.
No.
But it's a pretty fascinating book. So he was an Austrian psychotherapist who was arrested during World War II and spent time in 4 different concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
And he writes about his sufferings in those concentration camps and the things that he endured and sort of what would happen to the prisoners and how they would process things and how he kind of stayed alive through it all.
Did he?
And how he found meaning even in the midst of awful, terrible suffering.
He's not the guy who wrote Midnight.
Night.
Night. He wrote it?
No, that's
Ellie White. No, Ellie White. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Viktor Frankl wrote this book. The first part of the book, he just recounts the sufferings. He recounts his experience in the camps. And then in the second part, he talks about his psychotherapeutic practice and how everything is really driven towards a search for meaning. But one of the things he talks about is sleeplessness. And when you're struggling to sleep, one of the worst things that happens is you get so in your head about trying to fall asleep.
Yeah, you don't fall asleep.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
You can't fall asleep because you're thinking so much about how much you want to fall asleep.
LOL, did we just set this up?
No, we didn't. We didn't even mean to. But then he talks about the key is stop telling yourself that you want to fall asleep.
Yeah. There's too much brain activity. You're like talking to yourself. And so in a way, you're actually keeping yourself awake.
Right. But that works on a lot of different levels too. We start to criticize ourselves for not having accomplished something or for not being able to do something. Oh, and we get in our head so much about it. He says, just stop telling yourself that you have to do it.
Or we're trying to force it.
Yeah, I was really interested in that.
That is interesting.
But another thing that he says, and this is actually what I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
He says, with increased automation. Now, at the time that he's writing this, remember, it's immediately in the post-war years. He died in 1997, but as he was writing this book, it was immediately after the war, in those in that decade right after World War II.
Yeah.
And he says, as we see increased automation, what we're also going to see is an increase in boredom that will affect how people use their leisure time. An increase in boredom, and I was really intrigued by that, because in his mind, he was thinking that automation is going to make everything so much easier that people won't know what to do with the free time that they have. And I think there's a certain amount of truth to that, but there's also a falsehood that's present, at least in the way that we've experienced what automation has done.
It's bad.
And what being able to automate everything has actually done for us. So look at how things are working right now. And are we actually more free? Do we have more free time now than we did before? With so many different things automated, so I don't have to go and do this. It's just being taken care of. We have found ways to fill up all of our time, right?
Yeah. I have a quick question.
Okay.
Chris, if I pull something up on my phone and I let it play, will it catch well?
It should be fine if your phone's turned up loud enough. But do we have?
This has to do with this.
But is there going to be a copyright issue?
Oh dang! No, she posted. It's Jennifer Fulwiler.
That she probably won't get mad at us.
I don't think she'll get mad at us. Because anyways, she likes.
Can we name her friend of the show also?
Yeah. Well.
Jennifer Fulwiler, friend of the show. We've never met her.
Jennifer Fulwiler. Okay, keep going because this is good because this is her response to what good parenting is. But
at this point you should play it because I have no idea what you're talking about.
All right, here we go.
Good mothers this summer.
What?
Ladies, be good mothers this summer and spend time with your children the traditional way. Which doesn't involve any of this because traditional mothers were busy. For most of human history, survival was a mom's full-time job. If your kids wanted chicken nuggets, it was up to you to take it from chicken to nugget. Without refrigeration, food had to be cooked daily. Without indoor plumbing, getting water was a whole ordeal. The laundry spin cycle was your bare hands. And without electricity, this all had to be done during daylight hours. There is no historical precedent for moms being the primary entertainers of their kids. They never had time. Meaningful moments with their children happened, but it was in the midst of their busyness or in the evenings. Maybe traditional moms pinned clothes on clotheslines and you pinned clothes on Pinterest. Either way, it's natural and normal for a woman to have a lot of her daily focus on something other than entertaining her kids. Hug your kids, love your kids, tell your kids you're thrilled to be doing life with them, and then unapologetically make time for your own adult work because that is what traditional motherhood looks like.
Interesting.
So
thank you, Jennifer Fulwiler.
Fulwiler. She is a Catholic mom of 6, convert from atheist to Catholicism.
She's pretty funny too.
She's got her own comedy tour. You can find her online.
Right. So she's pointing to a couple of things that I think are important. She's talking about the daily activities and the things that we have to do. And I am old enough to remember hanging things on a clothesline, right? And that became something that I had to help with. Okay, I had to help with putting things on the clothesline. Now, the clothesline was too high and I couldn't reach it, so I had to hand my mom the clothespins. But part of what we were doing was, while she was hanging laundry, I was handing her clothespins. When the laundry came off, I was collecting the clothespins. That was the job. And so I was part of all the stuff that she was doing. And so it wasn't that mom was my primary entertainer. It was that I was participating in the stuff that she had to do. When she made cookies, it wasn't just for me. It was usually, my mom used to bake my parents ran a coffee house. This is the kind of hippie parents that I have.
Oh, they had a coffee house?
Yeah, my parents ran a coffee house once a month. They rented out a church hall. And folk musicians would come in and they would play at the Rabbit Hill Coffee House. Some of you out there might remember Rabbit Hill. It was kind of a big deal in the folk music scene in Southern Connecticut. And so mom and dad would run this coffee house. And so every month, the day before the coffee house, mom would bake cookies like crazy. And part of the deal was I had to help with the cookies, had to help with the baking of the cookies, had to help with the putting of the cookies in the tin, had to do all that stuff.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, there was a ton of it. But so I was included in all the stuff that my parents were doing. It wasn't that I was the object of needing to be entertained. It's interesting she's talking about that. But as things more and more get automated, she talks about the chicken nuggets now come out of the freezer aisle at the grocery store. You're not making chicken nuggets or anything. Yeah. As things get more and more automated, how have we filled up the time?
Yes, exactly.
And so often now we're never off. If you look at the way that we work, there's greater automation of things, and yet we're more attached to the work that we're doing. And so there's less separation of the time when we can work. Yeah. Because now we can work at all hours. Now we can work no matter where we are. Now we can work and do these things even though it's automatically happening. That means theoretically, that means we're more free to do more work. So in addition to the thing that we have automated, we're now taking on additional tasks and doing more stuff, working more hours, and then we're busy. And we're so busy that we feel ashamed if we're not busy.
Right. Yeah.
Right. The other part of it, though, is being bored. Because in the end, a lot of this stuff doesn't require a whole lot of physical energy.
Right.
And so when we do have free time, we have tons of physical energy, not much mental energy, but we're not spending the physical energy that we have. Because most of the time when we have that leisure, what do? We don't go outside. We don't make something. We don't grow something. We don't go out and do things that make our bodies move or anything.
Right.
We usually sit down and watch something because we don't have the mental energy for anything else.
So we just want to tune out.
And so we try to tune out. But then ultimately we're still really bored.
Yeah, it's never fulfilling.
Yeah, because we're bored, we're not filling up that time.
Yeah.
The other part is we think that if we have free time and it's not programmed, we're doing something wrong. So on the
modern mom and
dad, the positive side of boredom, the positive side of boredom is that boredom allows our mind to rest, and boredom allows us to get creative. But when we never give ourselves the chance to truly be bored, when we think we have to occupy every second with something, we end up not so much actually rested, but more exhausted. And in that boredom, we fall down rabbit holes that are really bad for us.
I had to repeat. There's this phrase that I had to repeat several times this week to some people. Because when you're stressed about doing something or being something or having to work, what do you have? It's like, well, self-critique. I'm getting anxious. I'm doing something wrong. And then you just create this crazy cycle of you're trying to figure it out. Like you need to have everything planned. And then you're paralyzed because you don't know what you're doing with your life. All of a sudden you had like a midlife crisis in the span of 5 minutes, and you do it repeatedly. And so several times this week, I had to tell a couple people the wise words from that one sister I learned on retreat in January. Don't F it up. Don't force it. Don't figure it out. Don't fear. And even that for me was a good reminder because that was 6 months ago, but yet I still fall into the same traps.
Sure.
I still do that. I just need to figure it out and it's got to be planned. And I just said it to somebody and I actually said it to Tony. He just looked at me and walked away. I was like, what's wrong? He goes, you're right. That's why. I was like, oh yes, I know I'm right. But but we just need to be reminded of it.
Yeah.
In those moments, because we can get really like caught up. I also had a conversation with someone else this week who went on his first like silent retreat, and he was like, I was really bored. And then I said to him the wise words of Saint Jose Maria Escriva, oh, you're bored? That's because your soul is boring.
It's great.
It's so good. But we have to get.
So there's the positive side of boredom and the negative side of boredom.
Yeah.
Boredom gives us that chance to rest,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives us the chance to start reflecting more creatively.
Yeah.
So in boredom, I become more creative because I'm no longer thinking about the task at hand, but now I'm thinking about things a little bit more of a remove. So instead of I have this thing that I have to do right now, so I'm in constant response mode.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody comes into the office and needs to talk.
Yeah.
In that moment, I'm sitting there and talking with them and working on their problem, working on finding a solution or just helping them to process through something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It might not even be finding the solution, but just being there with them, accompanying them in that.
Yeah.
That's not boring.
No.
But it's something that I have to do, and I have to be in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm bored, I don't have an immediate task that needs doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have something right in front of me pressing on me. Instead, I have time. And in that time, my brain can start to reset.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about this a lot in development, right? That when you're bored, your brain is resetting itself.
Oh, like sleep.
And kind of like sleep. Yeah. It's in that time of boredom that you can start to really get creative. You got to give some freedom to that creativity. But if you don't do that, if you're constantly trying to fill up the boredom, so I don't have anything going on right now, I don't have anything to do, so let me turn on Netflix, let me watch this show, or let me go down the YouTube rabbit hole, let me do these things, and I'll kind of constantly have something feeding into me.
Yeah.
But I'm not actually letting my brain shut off then.
No.
As soon as I have that moment of I have nothing to do, I try to fill it. And that's where boredom becomes negative.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that negative space of boredom, I start to fill up every single moment. And in filling up every single moment, what I'm really doing is never giving myself the chance to rest. As Viktor Frankl says, automation increases. There are fewer things that require my long hours or the work of my hands. There are more things that can be done by the machine, by the computer, or there are more things that just happen faster.
Mm-hmm.
I now have to enter into like a different space with that time of boredom.
Mm-hmm.
I have to get more creative. The other part, though, I think modern times, right? Something that Frankl could never have imagined. I saw this headline the other day. So a 33-year-old woman who is making, $30,000 a month on her side hustle that she started and automated, and she's doing all this stuff, and she only works about 4 hours a day.
What does she do that I need to know about?
What the heck? They put these stories out there, and it's somebody who somehow found a blog or an Instagram thing and started doing more stuff with it and started getting all kinds of ad revenue, and now really only has to work 4 hours a day, and it's minimal effort, and it's just in this great and you can do this too. I'm going, well,
no, you can't.
No, that's not possible, because not everybody can do something like that, because if everybody could do something like that, there'd be no reason for there to be any of those platforms.
Exactly.
Right?
It would be oversaturated.
If all of us had our own blog that was completely monetized by ads, no one would be reading blogs, because everybody does that.
You didn't know that you can do anything you put your mind to?
That was one of my favorite things that I ever said at a baccalaureate mass. So every year I say the baccalaureate mass for Sacred Heart Academy in Hamden. And so I've got 100 girls in front of me. Mm-hmm. And I looked out at them and I said, you've been lied to your entire lives. They've told you can do anything you put your mind to. And I am here to tell you that is completely false. There are a ton of things that you can put your mind to that you will never accomplish.
Excuse me, that was rough.
There are a ton of things that you can put your mind to that you will never accomplish, ever. There's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. No matter how much I put my mind to slam dunking a basketball.
Can't do it.
I can't do it. Yeah. So stop thinking that anything you put your mind to, you can do. And this like little gasp and then giggle goes through this class of girls. Like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. That makes sense.
Crushing reality.
Yeah.
When people are not
You've
prepared.
been lied to your entire lives.
Yeah. So
but there's truth to that, right?
I like what you said. I want to go back to the thing before about the boredom. A couple weeks ago, I don't know. I was sitting outside. I was hanging out with Tony, and he started looking at the clouds, and he was like, "Do you see the turtle up there?" And I was like, "What?" And I remember as a kid, one of the things I enjoyed was, although I hated it, being in the car while you're going on long drives, you have no idea where you are, but staring out the window and creating stories in your head, or like looking out the window and looking at clouds and, okay, what is it that I see? And that like entertained me. And I grew up in an apartment building, so we had a beautiful view of like the Stanford skyline before they threw up all those buildings that are there now. And I remember I would just always look outside and be fascinated by the skyline and to see what was going on in the sky. Or this one image that I remember of just like a dragon, going by my window, but it was a cloud. But for me, I saw a dragon. Sure. And when he asked me, do I see the turtle? I was sad. I was like, I don't see the clouds like I used to when I was a kid.
Right.
And that for me actually made me sad.
Yeah.
Because there was such a joy in that kind of childlike way of thinking and imagining. And I'm like, when's the last time I looked at the sky? When's the last time that I've been in awe of nature? Which is a thing that feeds my soul, but I'm so consumed with, I got to go here, I got to go there. And now that I'm literally dog sitting all month, it's like I have like 4 children to take care of. So it's just, but it was good because then we did it the next week. Like the next day we were like at a concert and we had to like wait for them to play. And he goes, what do you see in the sky? And so we're trying to I'm trying to figure out what it is that I'm looking. I think I see a stingray. I don't know. But it was such a beautiful invitation to look up and to, in a way, be reminded of the Creator. But how so much I've lost of that because of AKA adulting. I don't know. It felt like
That's not the correct use of AKA.
Oh, what is also known as? Oh, that's right. Whatever. Anyways, there was a genuine loss for that childlike attitude that I kind of actually want to recover. Like, what does it mean for me to play? And if that's a part of me just growing in my own human formation, well, like going to doing things that just bring me joy, but just being able to enter into it. But the fact that it was a struggle was like, gosh, I've been really weighed down.
It's disappointing when you realize that you haven't done something that's pretty basic in a long time.
Yeah.
That you haven't done something that's so helpful or so healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's disappointing when you realize that, but it's in realizing it that you can start to do something with it. So that idea of boredom, just to have nothing else going on,
mm-hmm.
it lets you look up.
Yeah.
Start looking around and seeing things. I think we're struggling, and I'm not sure that Frankl really saw this when in what he was writing. I'd have to go back and read a little bit deeper into what he said. This is in the second part of his book. But when he's saying that automation is going to increase boredom, I don't know that it actually has increased boredom.
Mm.
I think, if anything, it's made us more afraid of boredom.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that's a good point.
Boredom negatively experienced leads us to make bad decisions, leads us to allow things to get out of control in our lives. Boredom positively experienced is the reset.
Mm.
It's the reset that we all need, and that's required. That helps us to actually have leisure.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, we've both gotten rid of boredom and leisure.
Yes. Yeah.
So leisure, we've talked about Joseph Pieper here many times.
Yeah.
Leisure is that place where we find real renewal through activities that are activities for their own sake,
mm-hmm.
play.
Yeah.
Things that we do for its own sake, not because it's anything really productive.
Right.
Boredom leads into that and gives us the space that we need to do something that's not for productivity's sake. So we've got to get into that somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But we've both lost leisure and boredom.
Mm.
We don't give ourselves permission to be bored, so we overprogram ourselves.
Yes.
And then because we never have permission to be bored, what are we doing with our kids? Like, how often are kids overly programmed with their schedules every day? So they've got the following activities at the following times.
Right.
And that prevents parents from being bored.
Right.
Because now we've got a schedule that we've got to keep. So we've got to run the kids from activity to activity.
Parent
so
is an Uber.
I'm on this constant schedule of getting people to where they need to be.
Right.
I never have that downtime to actually be bored and to think of something new, to try something new. It's tough. I'm finding actually this summer I'm experiencing a little bit of boredom, which is good.
That's good.
Yeah. Because there's actually been some downtime.
Mm-hmm.
It's summer and things don't necessarily slow down here the way that they do in other places. But with that little bit of a slowdown, I've been like, oh, there's time for me to think.
Yeah.
You know, I just reread Gaudium et Spes.
Oh,
the
nice.
Pastoral Constitution of the Church of the Second Vatican Council. And all right, I'm going to say this on the air. I'm going to say it on record here that for me, Gaudium et Spes has always been my least favorite of the documents of the council. I've always read it and thought, okay, this one feels the most dated. They talk about the modern means of social communication and how news and stuff is spreading more rapidly. And I'm like, yeah, this is kind of boring. It's not really helping me because we already know that. Why? It just felt like it was, it already felt kind of out of date.
Yeah.
But I was rereading it and it felt a heck of a lot more relevant. So the way Gaudium et Spes works is it's the pastoral constitution of the church. So the dogmatic constitution of the church is Lumen Gentium. In Lumen Gentium, what the fathers of the Second Vatican Council are doing is explaining what the church is. This is the church. This is how we understand the church. This is how the church understands herself. And therefore, these are the various things that make up the church: the laity, the hierarchy, the religious. This is the destiny of all those who make up the body of the church, which is the body of Christ, the pilgrim people of God. Their destiny is this call to holiness. So we're called to heaven. All right, that's what the church is. And then the Pastoral Constitution, Gaudium et Spes, is talking about how the church interacts with the modern world. Now, if you read the Gaudium et Spes in light of what John the 23rd said at the opening of the Second Vatican Council, and if you've never read his address at the opening of the Second Vatican Council, I recommend it. Because one of the things that he says very, very clearly is that the whole purpose of the council is to find a way to communicate the immutable, eternal truth of the gospel in a language that can be understood in contemporary terms by the modern world. So the whole purpose of the council, not what many people say, modernizing the church.
No, it's about...
But modernizing the mode of communication. Finding a way to communicate the gospel given the concrete circumstances of the world. So the dialogue with the modern world is making sure that we understand what's really going on.
How do we get that wrong?
What is happening in the life of the world? And when we understand what's happening in the life of the world, then we can start to say, how can we best communicate the gospel to a world that understands things in this way?
Right, because the gospel is applicable today as it was 500 years ago, 2,000 years ago.
The gospel is always valuable.
It's always there.
Correct.
How the heck do we mess it up?
The way that Gaudium et Spes is structured, you go through and you read these spots where first Gaudium et Spes is expressing what's going on in the world, identifying different issues facing the world, identifying the different challenges that we face, identifying the things that are going on, just sort of painting a broad strokes picture of the landscape. And then it starts to speak about the possibilities for how the church can best respond to that, how the church can best communicate the gospel in that. So what's really beautiful is that it's not prescriptive in that it's not saying this is the thing to do, because it's recognizing that some of these issues require a lot more thought. But here are the principles by which the church is going to have to engage with this. Here are the things by which we're going to have to do this. And every single thing, every single response includes a reference to man's ultimate end. And the ultimate end of man is union with God. It's salvation. And I was reading it going, this document, all of a sudden, and it was because I was bored and I decided I would pick it up and read, this document says a lot more than I ever gave it credit for. So Gaudium et Spes is rapidly rising on my list of documents of the Second Vatican Council that I'm really interested in.
When's the last time you read it?
Probably a couple years ago. I read it, I think 2 years ago for, I'm
teaching
trying to
a
remember.
class?
No, I wasn't taking a class. I think I was giving a talk and I needed to reference it, and I just wanted to make sure that I had the full reference. But this time, just reading it, I'm going, there's something really good here. There's something really good. And then they got me on Gravissimum Educationis.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Gravissimum Educationis, if you want.
Grave what? Magica.
So it's
I don't know.
the importance of education.
Ah.
Right? So this one is about.
Oh yeah, you're really onto that.
Yeah. Well, this one was I'm trying to remember the decree on Christian education. I think it's a decree. So there's different gradients of documents. There's constitutions.
Yeah.
So that the four main constitutions of the Second Vatican Council, those are the primary documents. And then there's declarations and decrees that say different things. I can't remember which one Gravissimum Educationis is, but interestingly, Gravissimum Educationis came out just a couple of months before Gaudium et Spes. But it lists these different areas. So the first thing that it talks about is how education is a fundamental human right. People have a right to education. Then Christians have a right to a specifically Christian education. Those who are Christian have a right to be educated as Christians, which is really cool. Then it talks about parents having the right and the obligation to educate their children. So they have the right and the obligation to educate their children in the way that they see fit and according to sound principles. So Christian parents have a responsibility to educate their children in the faith. The church has the responsibility to support those parents and to help them to educate their children. Then it goes into talking about what Catholic schools are and how Catholic schools are a privileged place for the handing on of the faith, but also how Catholic schools have the right to exist. And the church has the right to establish her own schools. Cannot be forced to only support secular schools. Talks about parental choice in schooling, which is pretty fascinating given where we are now.
Right.
That parental choice has become a really big issue. And even the idea of vouchers, not in those words, but the idea of vouchers is present in this document that came out in 1965 at the Second Vatican Council. Yeah, because it talks about how when parents want to send their children to a school, when they've got the option to, or the choice to send their children to a school, the state has to respect their choice. And the state also then has to make possible the material conditions that would allow parents to send their children to a school. What that means is the state has to even fund it. Like there's an obligation there that the state allows this to happen. So when you look at parents who want to send their kids to Catholic school, they have to pay taxes so that their kids can, so that public schools can be funded. But then they have to spend their own money to get over and above their taxes in order to put their kids into a Catholic school. And what this is saying is that the taxes should support schools
in general.
Basically, I mean, like if we were to apply it to the way that our system works here in the United States, it would be to say, actually, the state should be funding education because education in itself is a good. And then the state should allow for different forms of education without controlling every aspect of it. It was really interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
I read this article about, I don't know if I brought this up here or if I talked to you. I talked to somebody about this, but how the intention of Catholic schools being to serve at the beginning, it was like the Black and the Indigenous in like Detroit, or in the Catholics who just needed schooling, who couldn't receive a good education in more Protestant public schools.
Yeah, so the Catholic schools began because you had the public schools, or what we would call public schools today, were explicitly Protestant and were teaching anti-Catholic Christianity. And in order to protect the Catholic students who had no other educational option, the church established their own schools. And so those served primarily an immigrant population. And then as the church became more present throughout the United States or the colonies, mostly the United States at that point, many of those who were in need of education were also either slaves or the children of slaves or natives. and they were not allowed into the public schools.
Right.
And the church said they have a right to education.
They do.
And so the Catholic schools were opened for them to provide them with an education.
Right. So this article was mentioning that, but then it kind of moved into a different direction and said it's coming to a point where to get a good Catholic education, and I mean at a good Catholic school that's actually teaching you, it's now for those who can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And I got really upset about this because I was wondering, well, I'm a church worker. I don't get any. If I have children, will they get subsidized?
Children,
sorry. If I have a child or if I have children, it's kind of crazy for me to think about, like, well, I wouldn't be able to actually afford a Catholic education. Then those who are really concerned about the state of education are moving to a classical model. That's amazing. Bringing philosophy into the curriculum. Like, we're so concerned about your human formation. We're going to move into this area, but it's only going to be available to those who can afford it. So now it's become such a privilege that the intention of this kind of form of education for all people, for me, it's like looking at, okay, well, what about those inner city kids? Or, those who just make it but can't.
Yeah.
It's like you can't afford the gospel.
It's interesting, actually, because if you look at our Catholic schools, the ones that receive the most subsidies and the ones where people pay the least tuition are the inner city schools. So if a kid is from a lower income bracket and could not afford the tuition, most of the time, what's necessary to cover that tuition is provided. The church has done a really great job of providing education for the poor. Where we're starting to see a bigger struggle, though, is actually in the middle. People who would love to send their kids to Catholic school but don't meet the poverty line.
Yeah.
People who would love to send their kids to Catholic school, but if they want to have their kids go to college, have to save the money now. They can't spend the money on tuition. They're Catholic, but they're not poor, but they're also not exceedingly wealthy.
The struggle of the middle class.
Yeah. And so that's actually the bigger area. It's not, oh, you're poor, you can't afford to come to the Catholic school. No, for the poor, we'll make Catholic education possible. It's for the middle that we're not doing a great job making Catholic education possible. That's actually where the bigger issue is.
So what about some of these?
At least that's how I see it. Now I could be completely wrong, but I look at how our the Cathedral Academy functions. For example,
and makes sense.
Something like 90% of the kids there are full scholarship.
Yeah.
And people are exceedingly generous to make that happen.
Yeah.
The donors and the people who support that give so much because they want to make Catholic education possible, and they want to make good education possible for those who otherwise wouldn't be able to have it. And so there's a tremendous gift that's happening. I'm not opposed to it at all.
Right. So
at the same time, though, how do we make Catholic education something that's reasonable? And while we're doing that, this is another big question. While we're making education accessible to people, including people who aren't below the poverty line,
right?
How do we also make sure that the people who are providing the education, the teachers, are paid a just and living wage? Because we've got to be able to do both things. There's the justice of providing education and the justice of making sure that people are paid in a way that is in accord with their dignity. Now, this is an issue also in the public schools that teachers don't get paid enough.
Right.
But
unless you're in a good school district. But.
And even then, they still have to spend their own money on classrooms, on supplies, and things like that.
So I have a scenario for you because I know someone who was looking at one of the inner city Catholic schools. He went there, was trying to look for it for his children as a better school option than the area, the town they were in. And he came away feeling like that particular school was too social justice-y and lacking a solid Catholic kind of the model that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So that was that for him was
Well, one of the challenges
and you're accommodating a lot of people from different faith backgrounds.
Sure.
So
and
you
right
have
there.
that struggle, and I think that's what it is.
Except that it shouldn't be a struggle. See, one of the problems that we've got is we think because we've got people who are not of our faith, then we can't be too strong about our faith.
Yeah.
Because that's going to turn them away.
Right.
On the contrary, what we should be able to say is, as a Catholic school, this is what we do.
But isn't that what's happening in Catholic schools in general? Like you're receiving such a big population of people. They're okay, we need to tone down the Catholicism.
There's a Catholic university that I am aware of that makes a bigger deal of sending out greetings for the Muslim holidays than it does for sending out Christmas or Easter greetings. Yeah, as a way of saying, see how I can't say it on the air. That's not fair.
Okay.
But as a way of saying, look how multicultural we are. Look how accepting we are of all different people and how diverse we are. They're actually neglecting their own Catholic identity. But see, a lot of times the Catholic schools do it in softer ways.
Right.
In not so much the explicit look how diverse we are.
Right.
But more just we're going to kind of soft pedal the Catholic faith, which if you go back and you read John the 23rd's opening address to the Second Vatican Council,
I'm going to have to read that.
He says, this is all about communicating the immutable, eternal truths of the gospel to the modern world, and doing that so that all men may be led to salvation. Now, if we believe that the gospel leads to salvation, then our Catholic identity in schools has to be the number one most important thing, because what we're offering to students is salvation, not only a good education for this world, but we're offering them the education that they will need in virtue and in holiness that will introduce them to the person of Jesus Christ and lead them on the road to salvation. Whether they're Catholic or not, that's what the mission is. Right. So our Catholic schools need to move in that direction. Yes. And we need to recover the sense of this is a Catholic school. You are welcome to come to it.
Yeah.
But welcome to come to it, you have to understand that we're going to be a Catholic school. Now, another place where there's been for years and years and years a question is, if we're going to subsidize education the way that we do, we're going to do this fundraising and ask people to make these big gifts so that people who are less fortunate can go. What are we doing for the Catholics who want to do this? Because there are Catholics who want their kids in Catholic school but can't afford it. But often they're not in the low income bracket. What are we going to do so that Catholic students are benefiting from Catholic education? Because the second part of Gravissimum Educationis, paragraph 2, talks about the fact that Christians have a right to Christian education. So Catholic Christians have the right to go to a Catholic school. And in fact, the church, this is the other part that's crazy. If you look, it's not crazy, but if you look at what the church says, the church basically says that Catholic parents ought to send their kids to a Catholic school. It's the right thing to do, unless such an education is not available. Now, available can mean available financially or available because of where you are. There's no Catholic school in your area. And so a Catholic parent is obviously not expected to send their kids to a Catholic school if it's not possible.
Right.
Or if the school cannot meet their child's academic needs. There's not an expectation on that. But in that case, so then just as we talk about, everybody has rights and responsibilities, rights and obligations. So I have certain rights because of who I am as a person, and the church recognizes the rights that I have. But then because I'm a baptized person, because I'm a priest, there are certain obligations that I take on. Because you are a baptized person and a laywoman, there are certain obligations that you have. So some of your obligations are distinct from mine. Some of them are the same. But at the same time, the church has certain rights and obligations. So the church has a right to direct education and to provide education, but the church also has an obligation to make sure that that education can happen.
So why is there a shift of like these more Catholic, and I don't know the answer to this, that's why I want to ask. We have all these schools that are available, right? But then we have new schools that are being built up that really are more like following the classical model of formation, you know?
If you want to get into pedagogy.
Right.
I don't know exactly what it is. I mean, the classical model is attractive in that it's giving a broad-based, we could say liberal arts approach. It's getting at teaching things that are fundamental to everything else. So we sometimes invert things. So I need you to have the fundamentals of ethics and logic in order to ask you to do some of this higher reasoning. But sometimes in our classrooms, we overlook the fundamental foundational stuff and we just give them these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So we're giving them more advanced ideas instead of having them work through different things. So as an example, when I was in college, you took your philosophy 101 class.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was in the seminary, my philosophy studies were far more organized than most other people.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a certain number of philosophy credits that you had to take. So you start with your intro to philosophy, then you take ancient philosophy, medieval philosophy. And you're going along in a sort of sequential order historically.
Mm-hmm.
And then alongside those historical philosophies, you're also taking things like logic, ethics, epistemology, which is the philosophy of how we think.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting into all of these other things along the way. And then you get into things like modern philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
existentialism, postmodern philosophy.
All the questions that we have, yeah.
But you first have to have taken all of those other things,
Makes
like
sense.
those survey courses and those historical courses, in
Mhm.
order to get you to the place where you can dive into the stuff that's more particular like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't unusual for the Philosophy 101, that intro survey course. That was the prerequisite for all other philosophy classes.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd walk into a class sometimes and find that the last philosophy class that somebody had taken was intro to philosophy. And so they're going from intro into, for example, existentialism. So trying to get into Nietzsche's philosophy is almost impossible when you don't know anything about ancient philosophy, medieval philosophy, modern philosophy,
Yeah.
when you haven't kind of traced the whole
How did we
history
get
of
there?
philosophy and history of thought.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're going from, I took this intro level philosophy course and then I got to this. I always remember in another class that I took that was a slightly higher level philosophy class, one of my classmates had only taken intro to philosophy. And so when it came time for us to hand in our papers, we're handing in the papers, and he leaned over to me and he said, "This, you know, what's great about this class is that it's philosophy, so you can just say whatever you want and no one can say that you're wrong." And I looked at him and I said, that's incorrect.
It's wrong.
I'm sorry, that's not true.
Sorry,
This one sent Paula over the edge.
that was wrong.
It's not true that you can just say anything you want and nobody can say, that's not what philosophy is.
No.
Philosophy is, in fact, trying to get at the truth.
Yeah, the best possible answer.
And there is such
That's
a thing
logical
as
and not
truth.
fallacious. Like, I said it wrong. Did I say it wrong?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Fab.
Don't say it. You're not going to get it right.
I'm not gonna get it
No,
right.
I trust you, but you're not going to get it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
That's interesting.
and then I remember the other wonderful thing was the professor, as he's collecting our papers, asked us to give the 2-minute summary of the paper. And so he starts talking about his paper, and the professor looks at him and he's holding it, hasn't even read it, and he goes, oh, you're pretty far off. Took the paper and walked away. It was great. Oh my goodness, it was so wonderful.
I think he learned.
Yeah.
It's not BS.
So I think that's part of what's attractive about classical education. Classical education gives you the classics. It gives you a way of thinking. And it seems that pedagogically it works.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't necessarily work for every student. Not every student's going to respond super well to those things, but it also
interesting.
is
Okay.
it's a response to the tendency to put a huge emphasis on STEM education.
Okay.
Right. So when you're looking at always bringing technology into the classroom, it's sort of making technology the aim of education.
That's not, like, for me, that's not where I thrived.
No, and it's not bearing fruit, because what you're ending up with is kids who can't think for themselves.
Exactly. That's
They haven't learned critical thinking skills. And so for many people, I think they view classical education as the antidote because it provides real critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
I support it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I also understand that it might not be the right fit for absolutely everyone. Pedagogically, we've just got to find a way to teach, but we can teach without being so reliant on technology.
Mm-hmm.
We also have to be reliant on what we know to be true. And so sometimes at the lower levels of education, at the elementary level, there are things that we don't need to be introducing the kids to. There are concepts and ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because we're afraid of those concepts or ideas. It's because they're children and they need another foundation in thinking before they can get there. So in the same way that we have a rating system for movies, because we want movies to be appropriate for children. And even then, like when I was a little kid, I was kind of afraid of the evil stepmother and evil stepsisters in Cinderella.
You were?
Yeah, because they had mean faces.
They did.
Right. So when I was really little, I was kind of afraid of them. Now, the movie is not inappropriate for children, but at a certain age, there are things about even an animated Disney classic.
I have one.
That can be scary.
Lion King, walking into a movie theater, and Dad just being thrown off the cliff. I was horrified.
Sure.
I thought I was watching a scary movie.
Yeah.
I was 5.
So there are some things that are going to be scary in those movies for children.
Yeah.
As the kids get older, they become less scary.
Oh yeah, it wasn't scary.
And they're able to handle them a little bit better. Well, the same thing is true with education. There are some ideas, not that they're scary, but some ideas that are beyond a child's ability to comprehend. And they're beyond their ability to comprehend them if they haven't been given a foundation. So we have to give them the foundation educationally first. Then as they get that foundation, they can start to build. Now, this is where boredom comes back in. Right? We're bringing this full circle.
Oh, no, it totally makes sense.
Right?
I like this.
Because boredom allows kids to think for themselves, to come up with new ideas and to try new solutions to things.
Yeah.
When they don't have their entire life programmed, and when everything isn't automatic, when they actually have to do some work for something, it gets them to a different place where they can start thinking more seriously, where they can come up with new questions to ask. And having come up with those new questions, they're able then to start looking for answers in a different way. The education part is hugely important. And I don't think that we can't solve the problems in a podcast. It'd be great.
No, I just, we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we do?
That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
But that's for me, this is a big area though.
Yeah.
If we're going to properly structure our schools, there's a whole bunch of different questions that have to be answered. How do we make the school financially viable? How do we provide the education in a way that's adequate to the needs of the students? How do we teach them fully the truth and form them to be the kinds of students who can engage with the world?
Yeah, be a proud Catholic school.
Yeah. But also who can engage with the world without fear.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you've read the Benedict Option?
I have heard of it. I have not read it myself.
To oversimplify the Benedict Option, which is, I think, a very interesting book. The proposal is basically for Catholics to follow the model of Saint Benedict, to withdraw from the world. And in the monastery, in that monastic life, Benedict, withdrawing from the world, created self-sustaining communities. And those self-sustaining communities took care of their own food, their own clothing, all their own work. They did everything themselves, and it allowed them to really thrive in a spiritual life.
Yeah.
Well, a similar model applied to the world, to those who are in secular life, would be to say withdraw from the secular society and kind of create your own intentional community. Now, if there's something attractive about that, I'd like to be around people who are of like mind.
Like mind,
I'd like to be around people who do this. So I'd like to, if I can find people and convince them to move into the same neighborhood as me, and then we can create, in most cases, it would be homeschooling. We're gonna homeschool,
right?
But we're gonna do this as a team, so it's not up to one parent individually to teach all of their kids every subject. You can have socialization. You can have the kids working on different things. There's something attractive about the Benedict Option. But one aspect of the Benedict Option that I think can be missing
is how to engage the world.
Exactly. And what Catholic education should be doing is teaching people how to engage the world for the purpose of leading people to their true end. Okay.
You know Ave Maria, Florida?
Yeah.
You've been there?
I've never been.
You know how I refer to it, though?
It's the bubble?
It's a bubble. It's a Catholic bubble that gives me Truman Show vibes. That is the first thing I thought about when I got there, because Focus does their training there. And so we went the first year, and I was like, this is interesting. And I knew the intention of the Domino founder. I just forgot his name. Like, he's like
Monahan.
Monahan, yeah. So he wants to establish a Catholic city, a Catholic town. So it was beautiful. Like the church was the center of the town, but there was nothing around it. It's like for miles and miles, it takes you an hour to get to Naples. And we were there as missionaries being trained to go out into the world. And Curtis Martin gets up our first night there and he's just like, you are not meant to be in a cookie cutter Catholic cul-de-sac. I'm like, that's where we are right now. Like, if you want
well, so in that case, sometimes you have to withdraw to that place to be prepared
to go be sent out.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like, we're not meant to always stay in that place.
But then you had families who intentionally lived there. And so for me, I was like, I would never want to live in a town like this.
There's a value and a challenge with it, right?
Yeah.
The value can be I'm setting myself up to basically be able to live virtue and live my faith without too many great challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I'm protecting my kids, my family members
mm-hmm.
from some of the dangerous elements that are out there. And there's a value to that.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I think every parent on earth wants to protect their kids from dangerous things.
Yeah.
Every parent on earth wants the best things for their kid, right? So of course there's the attraction of that. At the same time, what the church is called to be, this is again John the 23rd, his opening address at the council. We're called to communicate the gospel to the modern world in ways that the world can understand, not to change it or not to dilute it
mm-hmm.
without losing any of its vigor and any of its force.
Mm-hmm.
We're sent out. Sometimes we need that time to withdraw from the world so that we can prepare
like
and
retreats.
be built up. Yeah. Like retreats, or even honestly like the school.
Mm.
You know, the Catholic school can be a place where that happens, where we're built up, we're fortified, and
or moments of boredom that do that too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Actually, it's interesting. If you look at the history of Catholic schools, part of it was it proved the citizenship of Catholics in this country.
Mm.
So the American Catholic school idea was we're going to teach our kids and we're going to teach them everything that they would learn in the public schools while we also teach them the Catholic faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will be qualified and ready to take on jobs in every possible field. And so if you look out at the professional landscape of this country, you will see companies, Fortune 500 companies, started by Catholics. Mm-hmm. You will see people in the highest reaches of business, of law, of medicine, every professional field that you can, who will speak about the value of their Catholic education and how that taught them all these different things. It was sort of the proof that we have the ability to engage with the world. Now, however, it's more like, in many cases, not all cases, not every place, but very often it feels more like it's the world telling the Catholic schools how to function.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're more concerned about looking like all the other schools.
Mm-hmm.
We're more concerned about measuring up to the standards that are put out there, not by the church, not by the gospel, but
mm-hmm.
by society at large. And that's really dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So that's part of the reason that something like the Benedict Option is so attractive. Now, I'd have to go back and reread the book. It's been a long time.
It's specifically just really is more for like education. That's what the book is about, or just also just like
it's general lifestyle.
Oh, it's also lifestyle.
Yeah, it's like pull back from all of this craziness that's out there in the world.
Wow.
and find your own place and create this space. Now, there's a reason for it though.
Right.
Why would somebody make such a radical proposal? Something that seems so strange in our world, if there's not something wrong with the world.
Oh, of course. Like I met a family at a wedding a couple weeks ago who I think they moved to Kansas or something, and like they're homesteading, like they're doing it. And that's really that's beautiful. Like, okay, that's kind of cool, but not everybody's going to have the means to do it. And so you have.
I know the family that you're talking about.
Oh, you do?
They also have family in Kansas.
Oh,
so
that makes sense.
They didn't just decide to pack up
and
and go homestead.
I was like, wow, like we're gonna go do that.
They moved close to family. That's the other part of it.
Yeah. So you have those who can do that, and then others who are just kind of like, okay, well, what about those of us who are still like stuck in this, that we can't like do it?
And I think
we're just raising questions. I have no answers for this.
No, sometimes we think too much about, well, that's easy because you have the means to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about means.
No.
And we too easily use that as the reason for not doing something.
Mm.
That's easy enough so long as you have the financial resources. Not everything requires you to have financial resources.
Well, maybe not even financial resources, but just knowledge. That's another thing. How do you commute?
Not everything requires even that you have a tremendous amount of knowledge about things.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot to be said, like Abraham Lincoln, right? The legend of Abraham Lincoln is that he just read. He had almost no formal schooling, but he read and he read and he read. And because he could read, he was taught a great deal by the books that he read.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have much going on. His parents didn't have much in the way of education. He grew up in the log cabin,
Everybody knows that story.
Yeah. And he chased the deer and everything. That's the story of Abe Lincoln. If we understand that reading provides us with a great deal of education, provides us with an awful lot that we can know, we're in good shape. I got to go. Just realized what time it is. I'm sorry. I gotta land this plane real fast.
We landed now.
Yeah. Okay. We'll pick up on this another time. Thanks everybody. Father Sam Kachuba.
Follow then, yeah.
God bless you.